No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to go into another one of our As a Leader series. It'll be our third one, but I want to base it on something that just happened with us a few days ago, and that is our Sunday night Clubhouse Hacking Your Leadership live calls, because the one that we just had a few days ago really it was a great session. I think we had great content, great guests. There was a lot of people in the room. I think we got some great content from the listeners in the room, people who enjoy the show, as well as people who just stumbled upon the room. And I think I want to take some of that content and make that part of our next As a Leader series.
No, I love that. And I think you're spot on. Like, it's been really cool for the Clubhouse thing to just engage with listeners and talk to people and kind of expand upon topics. You know, we typically, our shows, normally go 20 minutes or less, but being on Clubhouse for a full hour really allows there to be some room to go deeper into conversations and to also hear different perspectives, different lengths of tenure, different careers, different industries, but the overlap that they have when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, I learned so much from those. I learned more from an interaction with people than I do just from feedback from listeners. People give us feedback on the show, and it's like, okay, we kind of take it with a grain of salt or take it to heart, depending on what kind of feedback it is. But there's something more powerful about an actual interaction and a conversation, especially one like in an app like Clubhouse where it's moderated, where people are respectful. I don't think we've ever had a single person in any of these rooms where we felt the need to stop them from talking. Everybody's been so great.
No, absolutely. I think it's one of the cool things about Clubhouse is just the ease to be able to quickly exit somebody from a room. And or report them or block them or that type of thing, and kind of the fact that it's an invite only. So at the end of the day, if by chance you're just not doing what you should be doing or acting kind of a fool, that you could be exited not just from the room but potentially from the platform. So I think that there's just kind of this certain level of accountability that happens where even when we're having some good discussions or even some debates or different perspectives, it's done in a very respectful way, and it's allowed other people to kind of share or maybe defend how they feel or maybe even pivot based upon new information.
Right. So in the spirit of the conversation that we had last Sunday night, which as you're hearing this show will be 8 days ago, what I would like to talk about today is, as a leader, how do you build a positive culture based on performance? And this is coming from the conversation where it was phrased in a way, the question was phrased, is it possible to have a high-performance culture that also has great culture? And we had some great perspectives on that, and I want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think that having a collection of people from the kind of the HR world to the executive suite world to middle management leaders, the dialogue I really appreciated because it turned into understanding and defining what do we mean when we say performance and high performance. What is that? What's that defined by? And the same thing when it comes to culture and why it's so important to have that dialogue, not just amongst like us in a Clubhouse room or in the podcast, but with your teams and defining what those terms actually mean. And then also as a leader, defining what else you include within those terms is critical to really kind of get down the path where your culture then feeds performance, and then your performance then feeds culture in a very healthy way. And I know you even kind of brought it up, on Clubhouse, talking about a little bit of the chicken and the egg thing. But at the end of the day, the general idea here is that you are forming a circle and that they're feeding one another in the positive direction.
Right. I think one of the things that I think is imperative when answering the question of whether or not it's possible to build a positive culture in your team based on performance, I think it becomes really important to have a clear definition of what is high performance and what is positive culture. And when I say a clear definition, there is no right or wrong. It's just what your team or your organization defines it as. And I think a lot of the disconnect between this, a lot of times when you might ask a leader or people on a team, whether or not they are high performing and whether or not they have great culture. If you get people who are answering yes to one but not to the other, I would argue that a lot of it is rooted in a lack of consistent definition across the organization or the team on what positive culture and what high performance actually means.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we discussed was like just kind of the idea of like a car sales lot, and what does that look like? And if you have a very sales driven type of general manager or somebody says, we define high performance by selling more vehicles this year than last year and by making everybody as much money as possible. Period. That's how they define high performance, right?
Yep.
And then they say we define great culture by delivering exceptional customer service that builds loyalty and has customers come back here to buy their cars and share their car buying experience with others to come buy their cars from here as well. Boom, right?
Okay.
So if you've defined that two things and if you heard that, say like, wow, that sounds like good culture and good high performance. Where does growth come into? Where does people development come into there? Where does the ability for people to push themselves and innovate? Like there's a lot of those things that you could say, well, I think you'd have to do that to have high performance, or you'd have to do that to have high culture. But if you're not specifying these things in your definition, that's when you get kind of down this dangerous road. And it's a very slippery slope, because there will be some people on the team that will take those definitions and say, that's exactly what it is, chip it away in stone. That's what we stand for. It doesn't matter what your feelings are, what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve here. These are the things. And then you'll have people that say, well, that's actually, these are the things, but like, these are the output of the things that we have to do to get those things. And so having that kind of lack of real clear, definitions and including the things, again, as a leader that really matter to you, that's where I think you can cause a lot of trouble per se. But for some leaders, like that's it. Like that is the end of the definition, period. This is what we do here. And if there's any other bits and pieces in between there, don't really care about it, don't really want it, doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. So, two things you said there. One, your definition of what is high performance, that's pretty objective. Like either it is or it's not. You can measure it well. You can get alignment on it. Whether or not a person is excited about that is another question. But if, assuming they're working on the team and they decided to opt in to whatever that team is based on knowing what the expectations were, what high performance is considered, doing all that due diligence, if they say, yes, I'm ready to go, let's do this, that assumes they're excited about it. That is a great definition of high performance, because you can be clear about it. When it comes to a positive culture, the example you gave is more around the culture around the customer or client experience. I think what a lot of people think about positive culture, they're thinking around the employee experience. And in your example, it didn't even address the employee experience, which I think is important, because that's okay too. Like if your culture doesn't take into account the employee at all, that's okay, as long as you call that out and say that that's what it is, that you don't give the impression or you give lip service to it about, oh, this is an amazing organization where you take care of each other. And then there's not even a word about what positive culture means from the employee standpoint at all. And so I think that's really important, because your example was spot on for that. And I see that in a lot of organizations where the culture is around the client or customer experience, not the employee experience.
No, absolutely. And I think it's such a great point, because again, when you and I think of great culture and how we define great culture, that's a different definition potentially, even just between the two of us.
Sure.
And then, how other people perceive that. Somebody who is monetarily driven, somebody who is very competitive, somebody who is trying to make as much money as they possibly can, and they're willing to burn the candles, and they don't necessarily maybe have, responsibilities or other ways to spend their time. That might be like the epitome of the best culture in the entire world. Okay, so wait a minute. I don't need to talk about my feelings. I don't need to answer questions about how's my family life or how do I do things or whatever. I just have to show up every day and sell cars and make a bunch of money. Oh, that works for me. That is the greatest culture ever.
Right.
Where somebody else could say, well, wait a minute here. Like, I want to do well. I want to sell cars. I want to make money, but that's because I want to be able to use that to spend time with my family and buy a home or do this type of thing. I want to be able to come to work and not just do good, but I want to learn while I'm here, and I want to develop, and I want to know that I have a career path. And again, to your point, either one of those is perfectly fine, and it's okay if one exists and one doesn't, simply because as long as it's defined, as long as you know what you're signing up for and you accept the terms of that culture and you accept the terms of the performance expectations, then that could perfectly fine work for you. I just think that this is why it was such a great conversation. When we think about great culture and then you say things like, it's okay if it doesn't include the employee experience, like it makes us like, oh, like, what are you talking about? How could you possibly have a great culture and not care about your people? That's so anti what we believe and what we think. Well, not if the people signing up for it are fine with it and they're okay with it and it's not a priority for them. And maybe they prioritize the monetary element of it or something else beyond how they feel while they're at work. They just view it as a job. Like, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It might not work for you, but it might work for other people.
Right. There's a reason why I never joined the military, and it was primarily that I don't know how to thrive in an environment where I can't challenge authority, where I can't ask why 100 times a minute if I have to. I need to know why certain things are being done in order to buy in around something. And any type of culture that would expect me to just kind of fall in line, whether I understood it or was bought into it or not, just kind of trusting that someone who made the decision knows what's best for me and my team, I have a real hard time with that. And so I would opt out of any environment that required that of me. But I don't think a lack of addressing the employee experience equates to not caring about the employee. Maybe that's how they define caring about the employee is, hey, we're not going to muddy the waters with team building sessions and all these the ways that would allow you to feel more connected to your coworkers, because at the end of the day, you're technically in competition with them for that customer who walks onto that car lot or whatever it is. The first person to make it happen is the one that gets the money. And so while you might be friendly with your coworkers, at the end of the day, if you're commission based and you're in this for the money, we're not going to yell at you. We're not going to berate you about anything, but we're not going to spend a lot of time taking you away from the part of the job that allows you to make money by filling it with things that you don't find value in. And that could be the definition of caring about the employees. Again, if that's how you define it and that's how your employees define it.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Like, this is a really fun topic. And I think we felt the same way when we had it on the Clubhouse show, because it challenges, your way of thinking and your belief in the definitions, and says basically, like, any definition is fine as long as those that are involved in it have the same definition,
right? And
they're okay with it and they accept it. Then you're good. Whether it's right or wrong in our eyes, or whether we believe it's a good or a bad, culture or whatever, like, that's beyond the point. It comes down to those that are there. It's to what you said earlier, though. It's when you say one thing and do another.
Yes.
It's like when it says, you walk into that car company and that car lot and it says, we care about our employees, and then they care about you, right? And then we say things like, it's all about making sure that our people have every tool they need, and they have the empowerment and the balance to make great decisions, and that we know that you do this job to feed your families or to meet your goals, and therefore we want to have balance and we want to have these things. And then you're like, oh, this is awesome. I like to sell cars, and this is a great experience. And then I show up on Monday, and they're like, here's your name badge. Get on the parking lot. You're a lot lizard for the first 2 weeks. You better sell as many cars as you can, and you can't come in here unless you sell 2 cars today. And you're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how is this the right thing for me? So I think that's really where it gets to the point where it becomes a major problem, is when those two things do not match, because a leader of an organization says one thing and then does the other.
Right. And I think this is where the topic comes into play when we talk about, as a leader, can you build a positive culture based on high performance? And the answer is clearly yes, of course you can. I think where a lot of leaders get it wrong is they try to build a positive culture that is based on other things. The employee experience. Oh, we treat everybody right. We have kumbaya sessions. We have free snacks in the break room. We have all these things around the employee experience, and they don't address what it means to be high performance. But when it comes to your review and when it comes to your coaching conversations, it's all about the things that you are doing right and not doing right when it comes to those high performance, metrics. And so it's like almost like a dirty little secret. It's like we want to talk about all the things that make us feel good and that make us love the culture, and we don't want to talk about those numbers because that's not a feel good topic. But whether or not I get promoted, whether or not I get bonuses, whether or not I get all these other things will absolutely rest on what those numbers are at the end of the quarter or the end of the year. And so by not addressing that up front, you're in essence giving employees a sense of two different things. That's when they don't match. And so I think the first step to building a positive culture based on high performance is calling it out for what it is and not trying to hide it because you think it's not as fun to talk about. Numbers are important. How you get there is important, and getting there by yelling at people and making people be afraid of losing their jobs, I don't think that's the right way. Maybe it is for some people. It's definitely not for me. But swinging the pendulum the whole other way and not even addressing the expectations of performance to where you're giving the employees the impression that, oh, I can kind of do what I want here and I'm safe no matter what. And even if I go 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 quarters in a row not meeting my numbers or my goals or what I'm supposed to be doing, that's okay because that's not part of the culture. That's wrong also. And that's going to get you in trouble as a leader by not holding your people accountable. And so absolutely that first step has to be making sure that the conversation around high performance is defined as part of the culture alongside the employee experience. Because if it's important as a leader to get your people promoted, how are you going to get them promoted if they're not performing? How are you going to say, I stand behind Lorenzo to take down this next spot, but I can't even speak to what his numbers were for the last quarter or the last year? That doesn't work either.
Absolutely. And I think the other part of it that we discussed was within the idea of performance. We tend to immediately think of things like what are the metrics or the things that the organization has set as an expectation or goals, that type of stuff. But also as a leader, we had some dialogue around what else do we include under the definition of performance,
right?
And how we measure performance. So I know I gave a couple examples. I'd love to hear a couple maybe from you, where I kind of talked a little bit about the idea of achieving personal goals. Like I believe a part of performance is seeing people do things like purchase a car or purchase a home or finish their college degree while they're also working with the team. But I also view those as performance metrics along with the day-to-day job expectations. But what are some other ones that you think of as a leader when you think about performance?
Right. So, I've said it a million times. It's one of my core tenets of a leader, even though it becomes almost cliche when I hear myself say it, is that a good leader helps their people become better employees, but a great leader helps their employees become better people. And this means that you have a growth mindset from a standpoint of how do you help your people get where they want to go as defined by them, not as defined by you. And that has to do with starting with really in-depth conversations around where your people want to go, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and then being very clear about what avenues you might be able to help them with within the context of the organization and what you're capable of doing, and also what you're not capable of doing, where this does not fit. And so if you have an employee who's if you're that general manager of the car lot and your employee's dream job is to be a firefighter, there's not much you can do to help that person get there unless you know somebody, short of saying, hey, you know what? If there's something coming up that has to do with like testing or qualification or anything like that, and let me know with as much time as you can, but I'll make sure you have the time off to get there. It could be as simple as that. That's how you can support your people, get accomplishing those goals if that's all you can do. If what they want to do is something within your organization, those doors open up a lot more widely for you to be able to do things to help them. But having those conversations at first around where they want to go is going to be key for being clear about what you can do to help them get there. And so when you talk about high performance things, if I want to promote within an organization, well, why do I want to promote? Do I want to promote because it means better work-life balance? It means less travel? Does it mean more time with my family? The why behind these things are the actual why. No one wants to get promoted because they want to get promoted. They want to get promoted because of something, or they want to take on a different role. Maybe it's not a promotion. Maybe it's just a different job within the organization. Why do they want to do it? Really dig in with the why with your people on how they have defined within their own head why they want to get to this place. Because I think a lot of them inherently know the answer, but they may have never or even articulated it to themselves out loud. And that can muddy the waters as well. I think in order to help your people get to where they're actually accomplishing those high performance metrics, whether they are business related or not, defining what those metrics are for the individual employee is a required first step.
I completely agree. And before we get into our 1-minute hack, here's a word from our sponsors and a quick shout out to our latest Patreon member, Rhea.
The 1-minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1-minute hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get out a piece of paper and I want you to put it into 3 columns. And I want you to be able to list in these 3 columns different definitions of what high performance looks like. In the first column, you're going to write down how your organization defines it. These are the things you have no control over. Your organization expects this, this, and this. Write it down there because in order to advance yourself as a leader within your career, if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to check off those boxes. Next, in the middle column, I want you to write down what you consider to be high performance, and they can't overlap with the company. You have to assume that those are yours also. Add some more about what you consider high performance, and they could be things with how you support and treat coworkers, anything. And then lastly, I want you to bring that list to a sit down with your people one-on-one, and I want you to ask them what they define as high performance for themselves. They're going to get a copy of this list. Your employees need to see how the organization defines high performance, how you as a leader define high performance, and then their own words of what they define high performance. And then the goal for you as a leader is to make sure that you can tie in the things that you're asking them to do into all 3 of those columns. They need to be able to check off all 3 of those boxes. If there's no overlap at all, if you can't check off all 3, then chances are that person's not a right fit for either the job or the organization, or maybe you are not as a leader if you can't find those tie-ins. But if you can find the tie-ins, it becomes much easier to define what high performance is for your people and much easier to get them promoted or to advance towards those goals when they accomplish those things.
Absolutely. I think it's a great 1-minute hack and is always a great reminder that being very clear about, what you look for from your people and what they should look for from you is a great way to create alignment and trust and relationships to be able to create great culture, which in turn will help you to create, high performance. So I think it's just a great 1-minute hack. It's a great practice, something that all of us should be doing probably at least a couple times a year, just as a refresher as things sometimes evolve and as organizations and industries start to change the way in which they measure certain aspects of metrics or performance, making sure that you can align those things together is a really good practice.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it really is a nod to transparency too. Defining these things on paper adds a level of transparency to what high performance looks like, and it removes it from the shadows of the dirty little secret where we know we're held accountable to it, but we don't want to talk about it because it doesn't feel good. We want to talk about the feel-good parts of the job instead. No, it needs to be at the forefront of it, not in terms of, we got to do this because it's our job, but actually tying it into what is good about doing this, why we accomplish these things because of what it does for us personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.